The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Valerie from Plumbline Consulting. Just give us 1 or 2 minutes. We have a large number of people that have registered for the webinar today, so we're just going to give them an extra minute or two to join us, and then we will get started with year-end processing for Microsoft Dynamics SL with Melanie. Just a few housekeeping items here before we get started. This session is being recorded and we will post it on our YouTube channel for Plumbline Consulting if anybody would like to view it again or share it. We will also allow the PowerPoint presentation to be shared, so that will get sent out in a follow-up email for everyone who has registered for our webinar today. With that being said, it's 2:02, so we're just going to get started for everybody who is here. This is year-end processing for Dynamics SL with Melanie, and you should be seeing Melanie's screen. So Melanie, take it away.
Thank you, Valerie. As Val said, my name is Melanie Brindisi, and we will be discussing year-end processing in Microsoft Dynamics SL. We're going to discuss the steps for the year-end updates and getting those applied to your system. Well, the year-end processing, including W-2 processing and the payroll module, project controller, accounts payable, and doing some 1099 processing within that module as well. Microsoft will be providing year-end updates in the following SL versions. Those include Dynamics SL 2018 and 2018 CU1, as well as SL 2015, 2015 CU1, and 2015 CU2. We'll begin with the application of the year-end updates provided by Microsoft. The first step is to download the updates via the Microsoft Customer Source or Partner Source website. Now, the site does require valid credentials to access the download, so if you do not have access, you may contact Microsoft directly or reach out to your partner to assist with getting such access. Once you're on the website, you will select Dynamics SL as the product and locate the year-end updates download. Typically, you can find it under the SL Service Packs area. You may also just do a search on Dynamics SL and year-end updates, and you should be able to locate it that way as well. You will install using the instructions that are included within the downloaded zip file. You want to make sure you're following the instructions for your specific version of Dynamics SL, as sometimes those instructions may differ slightly depending upon the version you're using. In prior years, Microsoft has released a YouTube video which would walk you through the installation of these updates step by step. I'm not certain whether or not they will do that this year, as the updates have not yet been released, but if you're looking to install the updates on your own and need a little extra guidance, you might go out and search YouTube for the video once those are published by Microsoft, and might be able to find a video out there to help walk through that. You do want to make sure that all users exit Dynamics SL before you apply the updates, and then also back up your SL system and application databases, as well as any custom reports within your SL installation. As far as the exact installation steps, I don't have them specifically, just since the year-end updates for 2018 have not yet been released, but basing it on the steps used to install the year-end updates in prior years, typically, we want to make sure we're installing this directly at the server versus at a workstation. You would locate the directory for your version within the download and run the installation executable. This is going to copy some new screens and/or reports to the necessary folders within your SL install. In the past, there's also been a SQL script provided in some instances that you may need to also run in SQL Server Management Studio. So you might need access to SQL Server as well to finish up the application of those updates. Now you might be wondering what all updates are included within these year-end updates that we speak of. Any current year reports, any year-end resolutions, or any changes that need to be done to make sure the processing and reports are correct, any electronic file changes and or any 1099 changes, as well as any changes to the W-2s. Now, the information that I've received thus far on the 2018 year-end updates indicates that the changes are going to include the following. One is in regards to the W-2 forms. The box 12 will include codes GG and HH. GG is for income from qualified equity grants, while HH is for aggregate deferrals. Now, box 9 is a verification code on the form. This form should not include any shading on any of the copies of the form, so there's some changes surrounding that, as well as the box should be blank, and on the plain paper copy, the box name tag of verification code has been added. So some changes around the box 9 on the form, as well as the box 12 with the codes GG and HH. On the 1099 forms, this is another change. Those will now accommodate filing box 7 amounts separate from other boxes. The box 7 is for NEC, or non-employee compensation. And with this change, you can either print all boxes, only box 7, or all boxes but box 7, depending upon the requirement for the date you're filing. And those are what we've got to date. Expecting to see those included within these 2018 year-end updates that Microsoft will provide. It is recommended that the year-end updates be applied after you have closed the payroll module for the year. There is a year-end update. This is what we've been speaking of, and then also a separate tax table update that's released by Microsoft. The tax table updates for the new 2019 year should be applied after the payroll module has been closed for the current 2018 year. The year-end updates include what we just discussed, while the tax table updates, those are going to provide changes to the tax tables used by your SL payroll deductions. There can be a few different releases of the tax tables over the course of the year as these tax tables change. The most current tax table update that I found out on the Microsoft site just the other day for download was dated September of 2018. So that, I believe, is the latest one. The year-end updates, those are typically released in the December timeframe, while the tax table updates are typically released late December or early January. So keep a watch out for those. They should be coming soon. There are a few items to take into consideration as you're working on your year-end processing in SL. One of these items, you are required to do calendar year processing in payroll and accounts payable, even if you are on a fiscal year setup. You can post entries to prior periods as needed, even if they are closed. Please be aware, though, and I want to make note of this as an exception, that your setup must allow for such postings to closed periods and years. There are setup options surrounding this in the GL setup screen of the General Ledger module that can restrict the user's ability to post to closed periods and/or years. There also could be third-party add-ons installed on top of Dynamics SL that will impact the ability to post back to closed periods and years. So just be aware of that if you do need to post back, and make sure your system is set up to allow such if you need to.
Melanie, we have a question in the pane. Your screen is cut off on the right side a little. The PowerPoint presentation, it's cutting off on the words on the right side. Is there any way you can adjust that?
Let me try and reshare here. Any difference with that? I think it might be the meeting console pane.
Yeah. Still not.
It's slid off to the side, but does that help if I drag it out of the way?
No, it still cuts off on the right. For everybody, the cutoff, we will send out the PowerPoint presentation for you to view later. So if you can't see the cutoff piece, we will send the PowerPoint out. Okay, you can keep going now.
Thank you. The W-2 and, let me get back here. There we go. W-2 and the 1099 amounts are updated based on the check date. So keep that in mind as you're reviewing amounts and where you expect those numbers to appear. Now, you may have noticed that the year-end updates provided by Microsoft are available for the SL 2015 and 2018 versions. If you still happen to be running on an SL 2011 version, Plumbline Consulting is offering a year-end package for the SL 2011 FP1, SP2, and SP3 versions as a billable solution. This is going to contain all of the same year-end updates released for the SL 2015 and 2018 versions that Microsoft is providing. They're just recreated and packaged for these SL 2011 versions. If you would like details on the solution, you may reach out to us at sales@plumblineconsulting.com. The pricing for this is $1,000 for under 100 employees / 1099s and $2,000 for over 100 employees / 1099s. Moving on to the payroll module. The typical flow for the year-end processing in the payroll module includes closing the year for payroll in the GL closing screen, reconciling the 941 and unemployment reports, printing the W-2s to plain paper to review the calculated amounts, editing the W-2 data as needed in employee W-2 history in initialized mode, printing the W-2s, and generating the electronic file. So let's visit these items in a bit more detail. First, you'll want to confirm that all of the data for 2018 has been entered and processed. You can review the payroll batch register report to make sure that all batches have been released and posted. Reconcile your payroll accounts in the payroll module with the general ledger account balances of those accounts. And you can use the account distribution report and GL trial balance reports to help you out with that process. We also want to print any period end reports, such as your 941 quarterly tax worksheet, the unemployment tax worksheet, and the earnings and deductions report. At this point, then, you're ready to do your year-end closing in payroll. This is done in the closing screen within the general ledger module. The December period of your fiscal year will always be closed with the closing type of year, not period. So depending upon whether you're on a calendar year or a fiscal year, when you reach the period that is December, that's when you're going to choose the closing type of year. The closing will cycle payroll then to the new calendar year. It will also create deductions for the new year and then history records for the prior year. So this is going to allow you to calculate checks for the new calendar year. And if this is not done and you happen to try and calculate checks for that new year, messages will be received stating that deductions do not exist yet. So another item to note is you want to make sure to clear all calculations in payroll before closing the year. These can cause errors in the new year too if those are left out there. So just an important note to reiterate, you must close payroll before you can run calculations for the new year. Here's a screenshot of the GL closing screen itself. As you notice here, the payroll module near the bottom, the year option is chosen for the closing type. My current fiscal period is 12, and based on the fact that I've got a closing type of year, this indicates that period 12 is December in my database. If perhaps period 6 represented December in your fiscal setup, then you would choose closing type of year for period 6. Now, if you attempt to make an invalid selection, rest assured the system will let you know. If perhaps you selected year as the closing type when it's not your December period, or the selection type of period was chosen when it's not your December period, the system will give you a little pop-up message indicating it's an improper closing type selection, and it will not allow you to proceed without making the proper selection. So there's safeguards in place, rest assured. So here now we're going to take a high-level overview of the W-2 steps for year-end processing, and we'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail coming up. First, the year-end updates are applied. Then the W-2s are calculated. Data on the W-2 forms should be reviewed. You want to make sure that the information contained on them is accurate. We want to make any edits or corrections as needed. We would print the W-2 forms. And then if you're filing electronically, last would be the creation of the electronic file. So once updates have been applied, you're ready to move forward with doing the W-2 calculations. So we would open the W-2 calculation screen within the payroll module. You would choose the current W-2 year, select the pay groups that you wish to calculate for. So my screenshot off to the right here, we can see the top left corner is our calendar year 2018. The top right of the screen, we're going to select the pay groups that we're pulling employees that we wish to calculate for. So I've selected bi-week, month, semi-monthly, and weekly. When we select these pay groups, the employees that are contained within those pay groups are going to fill in the lower employee grid section of the screen. We can select all employees by using the Select All button in the bottom left corner. Can deselect some if you don't wish to calculate for everyone. Clear selections if you want to unclear all. Once you have selected the employees you wish to calculate for, we click Begin Processing in the lower right corner of the screen. After we click Begin Processing, it is going to populate the tables needed to print the W-2 forms and create the electronic file if you're filing electronically. Let's take a deeper look at reviewing the data and the calculations then. So once the calculation has been completed, we can go ahead and print the forms to review the data for each of these employees. You can print the file and open it in a Word document if you'd like, or you might opt to print it to plain paper and review that before you actually print your forms and use those up. If you do print using the plain paper copy format that's available, this will print the boxes for you on the forms. You can also use the W-2 employee history screen, and you can review the data that was calculated for each employee this way. You would pull in the employee ID and the year that you wish to see the data for, and you can review the information this way as well. Now, if you do determine that corrections need to be made to the W-2s, we'll first want to try to determine what is causing it to be incorrect. There's several potential causes for these types of things. If the federal wages appear incorrect, then it's suggested to review the following items. We want to first identify any earnings types that may have been set up incorrectly. Also check for any missing exemptions that maybe should exist. And if any such items are found, we want to correct the setup, and then you would rerun the W-2 calculation process and then review the amounts again to see if that fixed it up for you. Now, if the state wages appear incorrect, we would still also want to review earnings types, make sure those are set up correctly, look for any items that may be incorrect there, identify any missing exemptions that maybe need to exist, and if any such items are found here, the options for resolving them include using initialize mode to correct the year-to-date subject wages and employee history to make them correct, and then rerun the W-2 calculation process, or use initialize mode to correct the state wages and employee W-2 history and do not recalculate the W-2s. So there's a difference between the two here. And I do recommend always using precaution when you're using initialize mode in Dynamics SL. If there's ever any doubt, feel free to reach out to support or your partner for assistance with that. And I do always recommend making sure you have recent backups of the database before we change anything in initialize mode. It's just a good precaution to make. Continuing on, if a tax amount is found to be incorrect, you want to review the following. We want to determine the cause of the problem, whether it's an issue with federal, state, or local taxes. Some things to review here is to make sure that any federal deductions are properly coded as a type of federal in the deduction maintenance screen. If you're dealing with state deductions, those should be coded as a type of state in deduction maintenance, and also in that screen, they need to have the two-letter state code assigned to them. Lastly, if it's local taxes we're looking at here, the type on those should be set to local in deduction maintenance. They also should have the appropriate two-letter state code entered in deduction maintenance as well, just like state. For tax amounts that were not taken properly, you can initialize the tax amounts to be correct. Some important notes here. It is key to correct the setup issues to avoid problems in the following year. So if you identify an issue with the deduction that needs fixed, maybe it wasn't set up properly or something got changed, make sure we correct that in the current year. If you're still in 2018, correct that. That would roll forward and be accurate then when you roll into 2019. Now, if you've already closed the year and you identify an issue, you want to make sure that you're going back to the deduction history screen to fix the record for 2018, and then also use deduction maintenance to fix it for 2019 and forward. Also, again, we want to be careful using initialize mode. As always, make sure we have backups. Feel free to reach out to partner support to determine the best approach in resolving it if you have any doubt or questions around it. Some items to make note of with the W-2 calculations. The W-2 calculation process can be run at any time. You can run it before or after the year-end close has been completed, as long as history is being retained for the year that you wish to calculate for. Now, it is recommended to go ahead and calculate the W-2s before the year is over. Go ahead and run that ahead of time, get a feel for what those numbers are shaping out to be, and then once the last check of the year has been ran, you can go ahead and recalculate those a final time as needed. If you have inactive employees who have earnings and deductions for the W-2 year, they can be calculated and printed as well. If an earnings type or deduction amount is to be printed in a specific box number on the W-2s, you want to use the W-2 control tab of the earnings type maintenance screen or deduction maintenance screen to indicate that box number, and if there's a letter, you would put that as well. So again, remember, if the calendar year has been closed, it's necessary to use deduction history screen versus deduction maintenance to access and modify the record for the prior year in order for that to impact your 2018 W-2s. If the employee W-2 history screen is used to modify W-2 information using initialize mode and the W-2 calculation process is reran after that, then all the previous changes will be overwritten. So if you would like those changes to remain intact, be sure to click on the option to protect edited W-2 information at the top of the calculation screen before you run that, and that will keep those changes that you've made intact. If you happen to be missing a state employer ID value, you can go to the deduction maintenance screen and look on the W-2 control tab, make sure that's populated. If you're missing the federal employer ID, you would go to the company maintenance screen in Dynamics SL, make sure it's populated in there. The W-2 forms report within the payroll module is what's used to print the W-2s. Dynamics SL does not have the copy 1-2 report formats, but you can use the copy D instead. SL uses a standard 2-part form and also offers a 4-part or 4-up format as well, beginning with the SL 2011 version. You can obtain pre-printed forms from a company called Deluxe. They've been providing these forms for years. They line up quite nicely with the SL W-2 forms. You can also print your own forms using the copy A, B, C, and D formats. These formats are referred to as the plain paper copies, and these will print with the boxes as well as the numbers for you. Copy A is the federal copy, and this one must be in the scannable red ink. Copies B, C, and D are not required to be in that red ink. It's just the copy A. You would use the Generate W-2 Electronic File screen to create the file you can provide to the IRS with your W-2 information when you're filing electronically. You would populate the required fields, which includes the calendar year, the path to the file that will be created, and you can change that file path to easily locate the generated file. Just make sure that you're noting where that file is being created so that you can reference it later when you need to pass that on to the IRS. There's also a transmitter PIN number that's provided by SSA, and make sure you're inputting contact person information as well. That's just if there's questions on the file or anything like that, they have someone to reach out to then. The company identification fields, these will default from the company maintenance screen in Dynamics SL. They can be overridden here on the screen as needed. Ultimately, though, they're defaulting in from the company maintenance screen, so if something's wrong, you may want to backtrack and see if something needs fixed over in company maintenance. Once you hit begin processing, it's going to create a file called IRS tax.001. This is the file. You can open it in Notepad, but ultimately this is the file that's provided to the IRS. You want to follow instructions provided by SSA for the W-2 transmittal. The file format that is produced by Dynamics SL is usable by a program called AccuWage. And what this is a free software that's provided by SSA to check the file for formatting accuracy. So essentially, it's just making sure that everything is valid and proves helpful in outlining any issues that may exist in the format so that you can correct it before submitting it to the IRS. I've got a link to that here. It's the www.ssa.gov/employer/AccuWage. That should take you to a page with information on that. Moving on to Project Controller. The steps for year-end processing in Project Controller include, first, making sure that all data has been entered for the current period and that all other modules have been closed for the current period in the GL closing screen. Now, it's too easy to make a mistake when you're working with your allocating, your billing, approving time, running GL labor posting. Take, for example, time cards that have not been approved that will post to the new period, regardless of what period they have in week maintenance. So just with these things, in order to help, alleviate some of these things, it's recommended that you make sure the following items have been reviewed and processed as needed before closing the Project Controller module. One, let's review the time cards. Let's also complete the following processes, including your labor commitment load, GL labor posting, pay labor interface. Continuing on, we want to review expense reports, run the FTT process, complete the revenue recognition and allocation processor, execute the billing transaction load, complete invoicing, and then you can close the period in Project Controller. Now, the Project Controller module is closed at the end of each fiscal period. The closing can be ran for fiscal period or year end, similar to how we do in the General Ledger closing screen. However, the closing is performed in the closed period screen within the Project Controller module specifically. So it is not done in the GL closing screen as you do with other modules in SL. Project Controller has its own closed period screen. This screen is going to perform a set of control tests when we run a closing. It checks that all submodules have posted to the project, that the accounting modules are closed to any additional entries, that all project charge batches are posted, and if any exception is identified, then the closing is blocked. Time cards are also reviewed and a warning message appears containing the number of unposted items being carried forward. Sometimes the closing screen will present warning messages. If that's the case, these items will not prevent you from closing. However, if you receive an error, these will prevent you from proceeding with the close, so they will block it. If the close period screen detects that the current period is also the last period of your fiscal year, the title of the Begin Processing button on the screen is going to change to Begin Year-End Close, and it will close the year. If a year-end close takes place, balance forward amounts are calculated for those projects that have their balance forward switch on, and summary records are written for the new year. Here we've got the actual close period screen, and as mentioned, it detects if it's a year-end or a period close. So here we have current period is 11 and the next period is 12. So the system recognizes this as just a typical period close. So the button at the bottom of the screen just says begin processing. Now if we advance ahead a month, the current period is now period 12, next period is period 1, we're at the end of the year. The button at the bottom of the screen changes to begin year-end close. So the system makes that recognition for us. It's no closing type that you must specify or anything like that in the GL setup screen for the other modules. Prior to processing the closing in Project Controller, it is important to review the project maintenance records for open projects. Any open projects that should have their balances carried forward should have the balance forward at year-end option selected. Balance forward at year-end is going to determine whether the year-end total of a project's budget and actuals are rolled forward as the beginning balance for the coming year during that year-end closing process. For projects that span multiple fiscal years, they should have this checkbox selected so that the ending balance is rolled forward to the next year. For annual projects, or those that are budgeted each year without regard to previous years, this checkbox should be cleared so that the beginning balance is set to 0 then for the next year. Now, if the year is closed and some projects were not marked as balance forward, the balances can be corrected by changing the current period in the project controller setup screen back to the last period of the previous year, and then mark the balance forward option in project maintenance and run that closing process again. So project controller is a little forgiving in that it allows us to do that. Definitely not something we would be able to do with other modules in that sense. In project controller, we also want to make sure we review the fiscal period maintenance to set up fiscal periods for the new year. And in time and expense, you want to review the week maintenance to set up the week ending dates for your new year if those don't exist. Now we'll take a look at accounts payable and 1099 processing. So here we have an overview of the steps for year-end processing and accounts payable. You want to review your open AP files, print the AP batch register report, and review statuses of batches, looking for any batches that may need to be processed. You're going to post the transactions in your GL post-transaction screen. Print the vendor period trial balance and period-sensitive aged AP reports. You can tie these reports to the general ledger trial balance report then. Make sure we're balancing between AP and GL. Confirm that recurring entries have been generated, released, and posted to the general ledger as well. You want to print the check register report and aged AP reports. You can close the year then in the GL closing screen. And then close the 1099 calendar year to roll the two open 1099 years forward 1 year. So we'll touch on this in a little bit more detail here. The 1099 calendar year control screen is what's used to maintain the two open 1099 years that SL allows you to have at any given time. The 1099 amounts can be manually updated using initialize mode in the AP vendor maintenance screen on the 1099 info tab if any 1099 amounts are found to be incorrect. 1099 amounts are calculated based on the check date paying the 1099 coded voucher. So even if you have a voucher that's dated to period 12 of 2018, if that's not paid until period 1 of 2019, that's when it's going to be recorded as a 1099 amount, the date of the check that's paying it. The AP integrity check screen has an option to rebuild 1099 amounts. Now this only works when vendors were properly coded as 1099 vendors and had vouchers properly coded with 1099 box numbers. Such setup changes are not retroactive, so keep that in mind if you're utilizing the integrity check to rebuild 1099 balances. Another key item to make note of, the 1099 preview report is going to show you all vendors that are marked as 1099 vendors, regardless of the amounts paid to them. So as long as they're flagged as a 1099 vendor, they may not have had anything paid to them. If they're flagged as a 1099 vendor, they're going to show up on your 1099 preview report. The 1099 forms, though, those are only going to print for those vendors that hit the limit and require a form to be printed for them. So it does look at the amounts paid. If they hit the limit, then they will get a 1099 form. If they're under the limit, no form will print for them. All 1099 vendors are going to show up on the preview report, though. 1099 amounts are updated throughout the year. So as we have vouchers coded with the 1099 box number and those are paid, and the vendor's flagged as a 1099 voucher, as they're paid, those 1099 amounts are going to be accumulating. There's no extra processes required to calculate and print, that sort of thing. They're all accumulating. You only need to run a process if you are generating the electronic file for sending to the IRS. So a little bit different from the W-2s in that you don't have to calculate. Those numbers are already accumulating throughout the course of the year. In accounts payable, you would go to Reports and click on the 1099 Forms report. You can preview using the 1099 Preview report or print the actual 1099 forms. The forms can be printed as many times as needed, so feel free to run through that as many times as you need. As was mentioned before, previews showing all 1099 vendors, regardless of the limit. 1099 forms are only printing those that have hit the limit. 2 1099 years can be open at any given time. Typically, the prior year is left open and the current year is open then as well. So, for example, 2017 would remain open as well as 2018. And then as we roll into 2019 fiscal year, or calendar year, I should say, we would roll the 1099 years to have 2018 and 2019 as the 2 open years. Printing the 1099s for 2018 would then be the default. So if you have 2018 and 2019 open, the default year that it prints for is going to be 2018. There is an option to print for the next 1099 year, or 2019, in the example I just provided. This is on the 1099 Forms report on the Options tab. And just to kind of clarify, you have your 2 open 1099 years. The oldest year is considered the current year. The most current year then is considered the next year. So if we were to look at calendar year control right now and assume I have 2017 as my current year and 2018 as my next year, that allows me to do check processing and such in 2017 and 2018 in accounts payable with that setup. If I were to print 1099 forms, though, and I want to print for 2018, I would have to select the next 1099 year option here to get it to pick up 2018. So if in doubt, just look back at your 1099 calendar year control screen. It will show you what is current and what is next. If your year that you need to print for is the next year, make sure you check this option. This is the 1099 calendar year control screen. This is what's used to purge the oldest 1099 year and roll them forward 1 year. This must be done and able to print checks for a given year. If you're trying to process checks and it's not an open 1099 year, you will receive a warning message and it will prevent you from processing. Be careful to only click the Begin Processing button 1 time so as not to purge the year too many times in here. Ultimately, what we're doing, though, is setting the processing option to purge oldest year. So my current year is 2017, my next year is 2018. I could technically process and print my 1099 forms for 2018. I would just need to check that box for next 1099 year. With this setup right now, I would not be able to process any AP checks for 2019 yet because it's not an open year. So in order to do that, I would choose Purge Oldest Year and click Begin Processing. And what that process does is it gets rid of the oldest year information. It cycles the vendors to the next year. So we would end up with 2018 would be the current year, and next year would be 2019. That would then allow us to process checks for 2019. We would still be able to process 1099 forms and such for 2018 then too, since we have that as an open year as well. If it is determined that the 1099 information is not accurate, maybe you had a voucher that wasn't coded with the 1099 box number, maybe the vendor wasn't flagged as a 1099 vendor, or something along those lines, changes will impact the system going forward, but it's not retroactive. So we are able to edit amounts on a vendor-by-vendor basis using the vendor maintenance screen and going into initialize mode to this 1099 info tab. While you're in initialize mode, you'll notice that the bottom half of the screen has the 1099 years. There's columns for each of your 2 open years. While you're in initialize mode, those box number values are enabled. You can type in there and change them directly what they need to be. So again, use caution. Make sure you have backups of the SL databases before you make any changes. Your SL login will need initialized mode access rights to the AP vendor maintenance screen in order to do that change. The Generate 1099 electronic file screen is used to create the file containing the 1099 amounts to be submitted electronically to the IRS. You can generate for either of the two open 1099 years. So you'll notice in my screenshot here, the top left has my two open 1099 calendar years. There's a radio option. You can choose which year you want to process for. Some fields required are the vendor PIN number. Let me see here. This might be on other tab. Yeah, here we go. So some of these are like the vendor PIN number, contact information. That's just if there's questions on the file, they have someone to reach out to. The control code is going to come from the IRS. Most of the information here populates from the company maintenance screen in Dynamics SL. It can be changed on screen before you generate the file. So double check the information, make sure it's accurate. You can change it directly here and generate the file. If you want to go back to where the info is pulling from, though, it's the company maintenance screen. Some common 1099 processing issues that may pop up. Very common one is the system message 532. This can be received if you're trying to print AP checks, and if the check date that you're attempting to use is not yet in an open 1099 year, you will get this message. You will not be able to proceed unless you change the check date to an open 1099 year, or you use the 1099 calendar year control screen to purge that oldest year. If your 1099 balances are incorrect for a vendor, that's where you can use the initialize mode to correct them in the vendor maintenance screen. There's also the integrity check option to rebuild 1099 balances. Again, scenarios kind of are different on when you would use each of those. The current 1099 year happened to be purged too many times, or maybe it was purged too early by mistake. You can reach out to your partner or support for assistance with some SQL updates to reset the years back and rebuild the 1099 amounts for those years. So there are some ways around it. We have to go behind the scenes to take care of that, but there are some options available if you happen to run into that. At this point, we will go ahead and open it up for questions. You can use the questions pane on the meeting console window to submit your questions. If you happen to have any questions after our session today, you can use the email address on screen, which is info@plumlineconsulting.com. I'd be happy to follow up with you that way as well.
Melanie, there looks like there's one question. It says, what is FTT in Project Controller?
That is the financial transaction transfer. So that's transferring your transactions over to update your projects.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we go over some of the Plumbline Consulting products that might be able to help you this year end? I don't see any other questions coming into the question pane. Well, we are going to continue on. Okay, will we get a copy of the slideshow? Yes, I'm not in the pane, but I'm going to email out anybody who had registered for the webinar will get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Any other questions? We can keep taking questions even after we go through this, the rest of this short presentation on some products that we have from Plumbline Consulting that might be able to help you, whether it be with year end or moving into next year to make next year's processing a little easier for you. Plumbline has over 100 add-on products for Dynamics SL. And just a couple we wanted to point out that you might not be aware of going into year end or starting your new year is if you decide you want to change your company's fiscal year. We do have a product that helps you do this. So it's called FY Update, and if you decide that you want to change your fiscal year going starting with next year, we have a FY Update that can help you do this. So keep that in mind with your planning if you plan on changing your environment or your fiscal year. Next product that we have that you might not be aware of is our 1099 Vendor Accelerator. Now, as you go through the year-end process, we mentioned 1099 vendors a lot in this. We do have a product that helps you with your 1099, your vendor's 1099 status and the default 1099 box settings. Also, you can view and update. The product allows you to view and update the 1099 transactions default box, and it gives you an audit trail for the changes that are made. So it's a handy tool. It's very inexpensive, and if you do a lot of things with your 1099 vendors, it might be something that you want to look into applying for next year. I think this product, this product is listed on our website, but if you would like more information or even be able to, get it applied before year end, you feel free to reach out. One of the other products we have to have that has to do with vendors is a one-time vendor, our one-time vendor product. And this allows you to update or to create a one-time vendor that you can post all of your one-time vendor transactions to, capturing that 1099 information, be able to process a check for them, but not having to open a new vendor for every one-time vendor transaction that you have in your system. If you get to the end of this year and you find that you have all these one-time vendors that you wish you didn't have to deal with, we do, again, have one-time vendor product that can help you with this moving forward. We also have a small little cleanup tool that allows you to merge your vendors if you choose to merge all of those one-time vendors that you have set up in recent years into one. So 1099 Vendor Accelerator, great thing. One-time vendor, also a great product. So on the same line with vendors, if you have multiple remittance addresses for a single vendor, in SL, you only have the ability to have one remittance address for a single vendor. This product gives you vendor multi-remit, gives you the ability to have multiple remittance addresses for that single vendor. So if that is an issue for you and you have a lot of vendors set up just so you can have multiple remittance addresses and you'd like to pull them in all under one vendor again, we have vendor multi-remit, and again, we have the vendor change merge tool that allows you to merge everything back in if it's something that you would like to do. Next up is if you are tracking your prepaids on an Excel spreadsheet and manually posting the transactions to your general ledger on a monthly basis, please take a look at Prepaids Processor. It gives you the ability to set up your prepaids, set up the amortization, what companies and accounts and sub-account combinations you want your debits and your credits posted to, and then all you have to do is go into this little Prepaids Processor box, choose the company and the period, and hit process, and it's going to post all your prepaids for that period to the general ledger for you. So a lot of people are doing this on an Excel spreadsheet, and I just feel that they just don't know that this product is out there. Again, too, is super inexpensive and will take that spreadsheet out of your life and put everything into SL, as well as give you the capabilities of some reporting that you might not have right now. This product has reports for prepaids with current balances, prepaids by period balances, just a prepaids report, and a forecaster report. So you can forecast your prepaids for future months, years, and things like that. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, look up Prepaids Processor or reach out to us and we'll be happy to give you more information. Next up is our Quick Find product. Now, I wanted to mention this product because a lot of people find searching for information can sometimes be tedious. You might have to go to multiple screens to find what you're looking for. And with our Quick Find product, used to be called Rainbow Search, we have this for multiple modules, all the main modules in SL. And you can go into the screen, choose, put in the information you know you're looking for, use the colored legend at the bottom to be able to say, give me everything that maybe shift $, which means contains. Give me everything that contains this information. Give me everything that contains this information that's over the amount of. Things like that. You can light up the grid like a rainbow, which is why it had the old name Rainbow Search. And then all of the information will export into a grid. Melanie, if you change to the next screen, the grid search or the grid is shown. So all the information that we're looking for will go into the grid. You can drill down to the grid directly from the screen, as well as export the information into an Excel pivot table or a standard Excel spreadsheet, which is not like the ugly ones that sometimes come out of SL. So if looking for information, I know personally I use this in AR all the time. I can actually find an invoice and hit application and see if what's applied. I can pull up the information. It's super fast and easy. So if this sounds like something you'd like more information on, look up Quick Find. For Quick Find, we have it in Quick Find Core 4, which gets you AP, AR, General Ledger, and Project Controller. And then our regular Quick Find gets you those four, including purchasing, inventory, inventory lot, and a couple other modules. Last thing I want to, or second to last thing I want to talk about is Audit Trail and Assure, which are powered by FastPath, but modules that we started selling this year for the SL community. If auditing is something that you know it can be a bit of a sore spot for you, and having to look up information or get your auditor's information about who made changes, why they made the changes, things like that, maybe Audit Trail is something you should look at for this year. This product is super easy to install and gives you the ability to see all of the changes that are being made in Dynamics SL based on your criteria. You can choose any of the columns and fields that you want to track. Anything that is tracked on your SQL Server can be reported on. And this product's a little different than our other products, as it is based on your user count in SL pricing wise, and also installs in your SQL Server and then not directly into your SL. So it just calls on your SQL Server and your databases. So if auditing is something you would like to hear more about, we would be happy to show you Audit Trail powered by FastPath, as well as we have recorded webinars on this on the website already if you are super interested and want to see it faster. The last thing I just want to mention is if you are using SL Payroll and have the need for ACA reporting, it is still something that you have to do. They are sending out fines for people who are not following the ACA reporting guidelines. So if this is something that you are not taking care of and would like to, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. I'm just going to let you know that we do have an ACA solution for the SL community, especially for the people using payroll, because it links directly into SL payroll. And we would be happy to give you more information about that. But going into the year, this is definitely something you have to report on in January. So if you haven't done it yet, there is still time. You can add this product into your system and be able to report for the government and for your employees for year end. So those were just a couple of our products that I wanted to mention to you. I do want to let you know that we're having a flash sale. This is just for the people who registered for today's webinar. We're doing 15% off your purchase of any of the Plumbline products, whether they're the ones that I showed you today or any of the ones in our catalog. You can, if you purchase between now and the end of the month, we can give you that 15% off. Just make sure you mention it to your Dynamics SL partner that this was a discount that we provided, and they will pass that on. If you would like any more information on our products or any of the products I showed you today or any of the products listed in our catalog, please just reach out to either me. My email address is vborak@plumlineconsulting.com or sales@plumlineconsulting.com, or you can reach out to your Microsoft partner, as they all have a relationship with us, and we'll be happy to set up a demo or get you any more information. Now, with that being said, we have a couple more minutes left in our hour, and I just want to see if there are any more questions in the pane that we can answer, whether it be on our products or on the year-end processing. Does it have an AP audit detail report? Does which product have an AP audit detail report? Or if you're talking about Audit Trail, it does it does have an AP, or you can track anything that happens in AP. So if that is what you're asking for, with Audit Trail, you actually create your own reports based on your criteria. So you get to choose which fields and columns and transactions that you are wanting to track, and you generate your own report. So if that is something that you're looking at, let me know if I didn't answer your question, and just put in a little more detail, and I'd be happy to give you more information. I will also be sending out our catalog with all the pricing for the products we showed you today, as well as everything on our website with that slide deck that everybody wants a hold of. So we will send both the slide deck out and a catalog with updated pricing. Does the discount apply to year-end update? No, Leslie, the discount doesn't apply to the year-end update. And just for your purposes to know, if you guys purchase the 2011 year-end update last year, you will actually be receiving an invoice with last year's pricing on it. The price does not go up for you. You get to it's a subscription base, and you get to keep your pricing from last year. So the pricing that you saw today does not apply to you if you purchased year-end updates for SL 2011 last year. Any other questions for either Melanie or myself? There's still a lot of you on. If you can think of anything, just let us know. Again, our email addresses are listed on the screen, and we will try to send out the PowerPoint presentation no later than tomorrow to everybody. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you for being an SL user. We look forward to working with everybody in 2019. And I just got something else. Do you know when the year-end updates are coming out? I do not know when the year-end updates are coming out, either for 2011 or Melanie, do you know when our estimated date is for year-end updates?
Typically, December timeframe is all I've been able to get.
Yes,
so
that
nothing
is
more
about
than that.
what December timeframe is usually about what we go with. So I would think mid-December is usually. They try to wait as long as possible to make sure there aren't any additional updates that are released later on. So I would say I would go with mid-December, but you can't quote us on that. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, with that, thanks everybody for attending. Have a great rest of your week, and look forward to hearing from you all in the future. Have a great day.